We will begin with the opening prayers. You all can hear me, right? Today, I would like to wish all of you who are listening to this teaching my warm greetings, and in particular, on the community of the Sangha at the monasteries in India, Nepal, and Bhutan, all the friends from Dharma centers, and everyone else who's watching over the internet. I wish to offer you my greetings. So from today, for the next for the 4 days, I will be speaking about matters related to Buddhism. Actually, this teaching this year is supposed to be connected with the origin of the secret mantra, but I've taken this opportunity to speak about the history of India, and within that, uh, uh, speak about the history of Buddhism. So I thought I would like to take this opportunity to give you an introduction to all of this. So over the previous days, we've spoken primarily about Indian history in general and the origins of the Brahmanical religions. And so from today, I will begin giving the introduction to Buddhism. Now I will speak about the dates of when the Buddha appeared in detail later, but it probably was in the end of the 6th century BCE. So at the end of the 6th century BCE. And so that's the period when the Buddha was born. And because of his birth, there was a great change in the religions of India. And before the birth of the Buddha, India had had a great deal of freedom and a great tradition of upholding the tradition of the Upanishads and of investigating the Upanishads. There were even many women. There were also many women who became very learned. However, at the most time, people just wanted to use intellectual or sophist logic and wanted to become well known through that. So they held a lot of debates amongst themselves, and in doing these debates, in the end, most of them ended up having the bad views or deceptive vows. So once they're debating, they all end up in similar positions. So they being about the same. So they started involving trickery, and so there were many people who had these deceptive, wrong views. No, even the people at that time, there were also a few people who actually investigated the fundamental questions of philosophy during that period. But most of the people, so there were just no matter how many people there were who really investigated the investigation of the actual meaning. Most of the people who upheld the Brahmanical traditions began to cling to the external aspects of the tradition. They only thought about the early aspects of the tradition were important. And so most people of all levels of society continued to view this old decaying tradition the same way as, like we have the Tibetan expression, looking at your father's cup as being important. It's like when you have the father's cup, it might be a beat up old cup, but you think it's important because it's your father. There's no other reason to consider it important except that it's your father's cup. And so it's similar to that. So they had this old tradition that was a little bit battered and didn't have much meaning anymore, but they still considered it to be extremely important. And so for these reasons, many people in the beginning, they had a really strong intensity of faith. But gradually, even the old traditions, as they became sort of pointless and pointless, then the people's faith also declined. And it's as if people lost their faith. And so, and also many people were turned off by all the people who were too involved in the external aspects of the tradition. And so the hopes that what people began to hope for was to find a new, more vibrant, living religion. And so people had a new hope, the hope to encounter a new religion, and that there might be a new religion. And so they began to have this hope. And the reason for this is that the old religion had become, had decayed, and it had primarily become an external tradition. People were turned off by this. And they wanted not nearly. And so those people who didn't want to just cling to an external form, but who wanted to actually practice the inner meaning, had the thought of hoping that there might be some sort of a new tradition, a vibrant tradition. Now, an even worse situation was that the Brahmas became more and more audacious. They got more and more audacious, and they had the power, right? In religious terms, they had a lot of power. So they were considered like gods at that time, right? And so they used their power for anything. And so this gave many difficulties. Also, there was the tradition of the caste system. No, there was never really much reason for it. However, the people had worked hard to entrench the caste system, and so for that reason, the Brahman's power grew, and legally it grew. Before, it had just been merely oral. Now it was actually written down in laws, and so the Brahman's power was growing stronger and stronger. And so for this reason, the way they acted toward the Shudra caste, the lowest of the fourth castes, was even more cruel than before. So they treated them even worse than before and suppressed them even more. And so for that reason, many people thought, well, the Brahmas had become symbols of people with no education or skills, whose thirst would not be quenched by drinking an ocean, or whose hunger would not be sated by eating in a mountain. So they became like a symbol of this. And so they saw that the Brahmins were like that type of a person. But now the Shudra, the lowest caste, were in the completely opposite situation of the Brahmas, a different situation than the Brahmins. They were not respected at all in society. They were not valued. So this is the type of people that they had become. Now, generally, the Shudra at the time was actually, in contrast before, was a little bit more broader at that time. And they also, the Shudra also made a great contribution to the development of the society, and actually had become a integral segment of society. They had a great impact on society, but they were not treated well. But they were indispensable for society because they did all the work that no one else would do. So they were treated poorly and not respected. However, in terms of what we speak about in terms of religious affairs or how their legal rights, the situation for the Shudra did not improve. Just as before, they were oppressed in an even more cruel way than before. And so they were always treated badly. And so there's a very, in that society with no equality and that unequal social system with such traditions, our, our Buddha, he was someone with great loving kindness and compassion. He had a great, really profound feeling, seeing the pointless situation of society and seeing all the disrespect and oppression of the Shudras. He saw that the Shudra were in a very bad situation, and the Brahmins were abusing their power. And so he felt great. He had a very strong feeling in his heart. He also surveyed all of the religions and philosophies of India at that time. And all those religions and philosophies of that time, he looked to see whether they're actually really meaningful or beneficial religions, if they had actually beneficial ideas. He considered this very deeply. Likewise, he taught that whether someone was Brahmin or someone was Shudra, the low caste, he taught that they're all no different, being able to eliminate the stains in their being and achieve liberation. Everyone had the same rights or the same capacity to achieve liberation. And so in this way, he opened the gateway to Buddhism to everyone. He said everyone could practice. He welcomed everyone. Likewise, in Buddhism, loving kindness and compassion are important. And he taught this very strongly. And so these two, and so it's like that, and the hopes of the people at that time fit well together. It's like holding your two hands together. So it's like the people's hopes and the Buddhist teachings really matched each other. And so for that reason, many people came together as a community and became Buddhist. And in particular, those from the Vaishya and the Shudra castes received very warm welcomes in Buddhism. In addition, there were many in the Kshatriya caste, many kings who also took refuge in Buddhism. So for that reason, Buddhism was kind of like a tiger that had grown wings, or if we say in the Tibetan way. It's sort of like a great Garuda bird flying into the sky. And so it didn't take very long, no more than a century or two, for Buddhism to become the largest religion in the world, the one with the most adherents. And so I think that saying this would not be improper. So the Buddhism at that time so this is why it is important for us to understand what this history of the Buddhism is and the background of the story of Buddhism is. And so this helps us understand why is it that people would criticize Buddhism or object to Buddhism. This comes down to the social situation at the time. Now, next, I would like to give a brief account of the Buddha's life. So when giving a brief account of the Buddha's life, first of all, I thought it'd be good to show you all this first. The first thing you need to know is, what is the Buddha's family line? And if you ask that, then the Buddha is in the Shakya peoples, and his clan is the Gautama family. And the meaning of the word Gautama is like the supreme bull. So if you speak about it, So it basically means in colloquial, it's like it's the best cattle. So they considered cows and cattle to be brutal and their best bull. So like the leader of the greatest of the bulls is probably called the greatest of the bulls, the supreme bull or the Gautama. So they called him. That's how we should understand this. Now we also understand the Siddhartha or the Prince Siddhartha. Now his father's name was King Shuddhasana. His mother's name was Maya. His aunt's name was Prajapati. Now I'll introduce her later. So Prajapati is later a very important figure. The place he was born was in Lumbini, and the place where he lived was in Kapilavastu. So that was that. So before I gave the introduction to the Buddha's life, I thought I'd give you an introduction to this list of the characters of the people in the Buddha's life. Now, as I don't really need to say to all of you, the founder of the Buddhist religion was the Buddha, and the Buddha and all of the philosophies and histories of Buddha agree that he is in unison. Now, the followers of the other Indus religions and philosophies call his followers by the name of Buddhists. It's probably they say. So these days we say Buddhism, right? That's English, right? But it's something like Buddha or Buddhanta or something like that in Sanskrit. And now what we usually say in Tibetan is insider Buddhists or Nangpa. So we have that word Nangpa or insider. Now this is a word, this word insider, and Nangpa is a name that we, within Buddhists, we give to ourselves. We say, I am an insider. And since the other followers of other religions are outside that, so they're called outsiders. So sometimes when I speak about Buddhism, I'm going to say Nangpa or insider, and sometimes I'll say Buddhism. I'm going to use either of them, but so whether you say Nangpa or insider or Sangyepa in Tibetan, it both means Buddhist. Now, the word Buddha these days in the entire world has become like a special Buddhist word. But actually, if you look at it, the word Buddha was used not only by the Buddhists. Yesterday, there was the Jain religion that I introduced. The Jain religion. So we call the Jain. The Jains also use the word Buddha. And they say that there are 45 sages or 45 rishis, and they call all of them Buddhas. So they say that they're all Buddhas. They say that they will not take rebirth. They will not be reborn in existence. Likewise, we also call the Buddha the Muni or the Bhagavan, right? We also call them the Bhagavan. So in Tibetan, that would be Chomdende. In English, we use the word Bhagavan, the Sanskrit word. We also call it the Arhat. And all of these words are used by the Buddhas, and they're also used in the Jain religion. The Jains use all of these words. However, now the founder of the Jain religion was named Mahavira, right? And so if we translate that into English, that'd be like the great hero. And so they called their founder, their teacher, by the name of Jinnah or Victor. So they commonly called him the Jinnah. And because they called him Jinnah, their religion was called the Jain. Jain. The reason why it's a Jain is because they called their founder the Jinna. They followed him, so they're called the Jain, or the people of the Jinna. No, among us Buddhists, we do use the word Jinna or victor for the Buddha, especially in the Mahayana. There's even more, it's used more frequently in the Mahayana. But he was called the Buddha. And so for that reason, the religion is called by the name of the Buddha. It's called Buddhism. No, generally, we Buddhists assert that there are many Buddhas, such as the Buddhas of the three times, that those of the past and the future. We say there are many Buddhas. But the one who is accepted as the teacher or the founder of Buddhism is generally said to be the Buddha Shakyamuni. And so this name, Buddha Shakyamuni, is like an individual name of the Buddha of our period. And so I think it's fine to say that. Now, there are, of course, other Buddhas who had very similar names, as Shakyamuni or the great Shakyamuni. But we can also say that it's also, if you say that it's also the special name for the particular name of the Buddha Shakyamuni, then I think there's nothing wrong with saying that. Now, the reason why he's called the Shakyamuni is because he was the greatest being, or the great born in the Shakya ethnic group. He was called by that name of Shakyamuni. And so the Buddha was born in the Shakya ethnic group, and his clan within the Shakya ethnic group is called the Gautama. So many Westerners call Buddha the Buddha by the name Gautama Buddha. Gautama is the name of his clan, and Buddha is the name he's well known by, and so they call him the Gautama Buddha. But within the northern tradition, or the northern traditions, or in Buddha tradition, we call him the Buddha Shakyamuni. We don't call him the Gautama Buddha. So he was born within the Shakya ethnic group. And so who is that Shakya group? The Shakyas at that time, where did they live at that time? First, if I show you this map. So where is it, if you ask? So in terms of present day geography, it's around the border between Nepal and India. So there were a small group of people. So there's a small tribe, a small ethnic group, a small number of people. And the name of the capital was called, their capital was called Kapilavastu. So in Tibetan, this is said Sergyedrong. So it's Kapilavastu. So Kapilavastu was here. This is Kapilavastu. That is Kapilavastu. Now, the reason why it is called Kapilavastu, and the reason why they're called the Shakya, there are many different explanations of these terms. However, one of the most important famous Indian poets, one of the most famous Buddhist masters, is a Buddhist master named Ashvaghosha, and he wrote a work called the poem of Sundarananda. And so this is named after the Buddha's younger brother Nanda. And so this is a long poem. And what it says in there is that the Shakyas were descendants of King Ikshvaku. So first there was a father who had many sons, and there was a kind of the ministers fomented a dispute, and so he had to send all of his sons off into a forest. Now, when they talked, and when they sent him to the forest, now this forest had many shaka or teal trees. Now, I've looked for the name of this. There's a shaka tree, and I haven't found it. Now, this shaka tree that was plentiful in the forest that they were staying in. Now, all of his sons and daughters had spent such a long time in that forest that they were given the name Shakya, because they spent such a long time in a forest of shaka trees that they were called by the name Shakya. It also says in this poem that the reason why their town was called Kapilavastu is that this is where the sage Kapila, probably the one who was the teacher or founder of the Sankhya tradition. So the place where he stayed was the place where he stayed. And the Shakyas there became his students. They became the students of Kapila, and so after Kapila passed away, they named their town after him, and they called it by the name Kapilavastu. At any time, at the time of the Buddha, who was the leader of Kapilavastu was King Shuddhadana. He was the king's father, right? He was the Buddha's father, right? And then nearby there was another town, and that was called the town of Devadaha. Now the leader of Devadahu was Shakyasuppa Buddha, and so that was his name. So this is a town called Devadaha or Ramagrama. Now these two were related, and so they also they got along very well. Now, generally, among the Shakyan people, their leaders or their kings they were chosen according to their age and the qualities. And then within that, they picked someone, and they'd serve as kings in turn. So, in general, the Shakyans of that time had a political independence. They had power over all of their internal affairs. But were they completely independent kingdom? They were not. They were not able to be a completely independent kingdom because at that time in northern India, there was a really powerful kingdom, and that kingdom was called Kosala. So this is called Kosala. This is a very powerful kingdom. They had no choice but to become like a vassal state of that. So where is Kosala at that time? So here is Kosala. So this is the kingdom of Kosala. So this is such a very powerful kingdom, and they're very near it. And so they had no choice but to become a vassal state of the Shakyans. But if we think about it from one perspective, the Shakyans had a lot of freedom on their own, and they were also very prosperous. They're also high caste, and they were prosperous. And so even within the Kosala, the Shakyas were the most prosperous people. Now, at that time, in Kosala, the king of Kosala was named Prasenajit. And his capital city, Prasenajit's capital city was Shravasti. And so he lived in the region of Shravasti. Now, King Prasenajit was a very skillful king. So for that reason, the region that he ruled over carried a very, very large area. So as if like the the lands of the Shaka peoples were like almost entirely encircled by Kosala. Now, to the south of the kingdom of Kosala, there was another powerful kingdom. Now, what was that kingdom? It's this. That's right, Magadha. So, to the south of this powerful kingdom, to the south of Kosala, was called Magadha. Now, the king of Magadha at that time was Bimbisara. And so the capital of Magadha, Bimbisara's capital was Rajagriha. So he lived in the area of Rajagriha. And then to the east of the kingdom of to the east of the region of Magadha is a kingdom called Anga. So the capital of this is called Champaka. And so the king of Anga ruled from Champaka. Now, there are many other smaller, minor kingdoms, but I don't need to introduce all of them. Perhaps in the next few days, if I have time, I can introduce them to you, but I think that's enough about them for today. So now I thought I'd like to give a little bit of an introduction to like the family tree of the Buddha. So as I said before, the Buddha's ethnic group among the four castes at that time, there were the four castes in India, right? Among the four castes, so what caste was it included in? It's possible that he was probably Kshatriya. It's possible, but it's not definite. And the reason why it's not definite is that from one angle, even within the Shakya people, there's probably no distinction of the four castes. Among the Shakyas themselves, they didn't make distinctions between Brahmins and Kshatriya and so forth. Likewise, the Shakya people were primarily all farmers. And the crop they primarily produced was rice. And so for this reason, if we say that they're Kshatriyas, then it's not right to say that because the Kshatriyas did not practice farming. And so this is one reason to suspect that. And so then you wonder, well, were the Shakya people, were they an Aryan people? That's not true. Not necessarily true. Then were they an Asian ethnic group? They are not. If you need to say, where did the Shakya ethnic group come from? It's difficult to actually say. These days, researchers have researched a great deal into where the Shakya ethnic group came from, but they haven't been able to decide it. It's a very complicated matter, so I don't need to speak about it today. But in any case, the Shakya said that they're, say, from the descendants of King Ikshvaku. And since they're descendants of Ikshvaku, so yesterday I spoke about the Surya Vamsha and the Soma Vamsha. So they're included in the Surya Vamsha, the clan of the sun. And so when you talk about the Soma Vamsha and the Surya Vamsha, the sun and moon clans, these are very important family lineages within India. So there's a high class that everyone respected in India at that time. So what is like the family tree of the Shakyas? If we think about the family lineage of the Shakyas, there are only disagreements amongst them. There's no agreement at all. But to speak of it in general, I think it's beneficial. So basically, I'm going to base this on the Abhinishkrama Sutra, which is in Tibetan. Now, there's also a similar sutra of the same title in Tibetan, but I'm not certain if it is the same. But the one that I'm going to give this introduction based upon is the one that is in Chinese. And within that sutra, they speak about the family lineage of the Buddha. And so I'm going to introduce the Buddha's family tree according to the Chinese version of the Abhidhamma Sutra. Likewise, also the great scholar named Rhys Davids. He was probably over 100 years ago, but he was a scholar from that time in the West. So I'm going to take the Abhidhamma Sutra as the basis and fill in the blanks according to the research done by the scholar Rhys Davids. So first of all, I'd like to show you this. So this is it. So what should I say? So there's the King Jayasena. He had a son named Simhahana and a daughter named Yashodhara. So Simhahanu had 4 sons and 1 daughter. Among these 4 saints, the first of these is Shuddhodana. So the Shuddhodana is Buddha's father, King Shuddhodana. And so Shuddhodana had 2 sons. The older was Siddhartha, that was the Buddha, and the younger was named Nanda. So Nanda was the Buddha's younger brother. He was a half-brother. They had the same father, but a different mother. Now, after Shuddhodana, the second brother was named Shuklodana. And he had 2 sons named Nandka and Bhadraka, who both later became monks. And then there was Dharuse, Dronadana, who had 2 sons, Ananda and Devadatta. Now, there are 2 different Devadatas, actually, because there's a Devadatta. It's understood to mean a Devadatta who was a Buddha student, and it also is understood as the Devadatta who appeared as the opponent of the Buddha. So what they say in the Theravada tradition is that Devadatta was a Devadatta from the city of Devadatta. So he was like an uncle of the Buddha. But in the northern Buddha tradition and in the Chinese tradition, Devadatta Devadatta is the one who was the opponent of the Buddha, the Buddha's rival. No, but there's some debate over who the father was, whether it was Dronadana or Shuddhodana, or another of the brothers. Then there was Amritadana, who had 2 sons, Aniruddha and Mahanama. And then there's the daughter named Amrita. So she was the younger sister of the 4 sons. And she had a son named Tisha. So the son or daughter named Tisha. So this is what happened. It can be it's very complicated. So maybe I'll just leave it there. It's so complicated. So when we reconvene, I will give you an introduction. It's a little bit complicated, so I will give you an introduction once we return after the break.